With the unskilled labor, also there was a backlash because initially I had to be like, hey, do this, and it would be difficult because they don't see you as the boss, they don't see you as someone who they'll take instructions from, because A, you're younger than them most likely, and B, you're a girl. So it took a while for them also to get used. For them, the easiest way to get them to understand was to show them how it was better to do it your way and quicker and more efficient, but also easier for them. So the minute they realized that, oh, acha, this is easier than doing it our way, they were like, oh, okay, you're right. So that was the easiest way to kind of convince them and make them realize why you are where you are, very honestly.
We are three friends who met in college and now are working in diverse fields across the globe. Curious to know about what our friends are up to. So here we are, connecting, talking, and learning from our friends. In this podcast, we are sharing extraordinary insights from our not so ordinary friends, working in various industries and sharing their stories and their journey so far.
These are your hosts, Hiloni Panatar,
Atit Kothari,
and Tapan Desai.
And this is What the Hat. Subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss on any episodes.
Today we have with us Pooja Gadiali, an entrepreneur and consultant by day, and a writer and serial TV show viewer by night. She strives to challenge herself every day so that she can continue to learn and grow. We are really excited to have you on the show, Pooja, and to know more about your journey.
So before we move on, it's been a decade since I know Pooja. Like I remember, I think we met on the first day of college itself.
Yeah.
We had like the same lab, and we were sitting right across each other. I think it was me, Siraj, Lavina, and you.
Yep.
And so yeah, I still remember that first.
My God, it's
and
been a
then-
decade.
So you guys directly met in college? Like I always thought you guys, like your entire group were already friends.
No, we met in college, and it was the most hilarious way to meet. So I think three of us were sitting in the front. I think Shraddha, Lavina, and me were sitting in the front, and Atit and Siraj and Harshil and Yash, they were sitting right behind us. And I think Siraj was talking to Shraddha or something. It was really strange because out of nowhere, when the lunch break came, I think I or Shraddha asked the guys if they wanted to join us for lunch, and that's how we became friends. Like literally, I knew Shraddha and Lavina from before, but I didn't know any of the boys. So yeah.
That is so interesting. That's like I have like I don't have similar, like I knew Hiloni and like I think one more person, I think Soham from 11th 12th. But the funniest part was like, so like on my first day of DJ, right, I before coming to the class I went to check the gymkhana where everyone played carom, right? So I just went there and there was a seat open, so I just sat there, and like right in front of me there was Kashyap, so we started playing randomly.
Nice.
And I didn't even know he was in IT or
So
anything.
y'all didn't know? Oh,
No,
you didn't
yeah,
know that
I had
y'all
no
were in the
idea.
same class. Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then we played. We were unbeaten for 9 games
Oh shit.
straight, and then we just kept
Wow.
talking. And then I was like, I have to go to my class, like it's getting late. So he was like, even I'm going to the class. So I was like, which class are you in? He's like, IT. So I was like, even I'm going to IT. That's how I met him. That was so funny. So he was actually the first friend I made in DJ when I came.
So it's like we always start from you into engineering and DJ in the first place.
Honestly, engineering was a very natural step because I think in the 11th, right before we started junior college, actually, my dad had made me meet one of his friends who was actually into teaching C and C++ to younger kids. And he said, oh, why don't you sit for one of these classes and see what you think of it and stuff like that. And so um, I kind of had an interest back then, and then decided to do engineering, but just wasn't sure whether to do IT or computers or chemical. I had an inclination towards chemistry ever since we were in school. So that's how I kind of decided, okay, engineering is definitely the way to go. And then, in fact, it was during DJ's admission process that I decided IT. I hadn't decided what I wanted to do up until then. So that was my thought process behind engineering. It was more, oh, I like C++, I enjoyed those classes. Why not do IT?
You also participated in a different bunch of different activities while in DJ, right?
Yeah.
College festivals. Do you think that helped you what you're doing right now? Any important lessons that you learned?
Definitely. So, had it not been for these festivals, Pulse, Parachai, I would have given up two things. So, I would have given up painting pretty early on, which I continue to do now. So, I kind of maintained my hobby through that. I was on the creative team for most of the part. And the other major thing that I actually learned was during marketing, which I still use today. So, I used to be the kind of person who wouldn't be able to make a cold call, who wouldn't be able to go and talk to someone randomly. And when you're running a business, when you're running, or even when, in fact, for that matter, if you're a consultant, you have to be able to go and talk to your clients very easily. So that's something that stuck on. I learned it, you know, through the festival, and it was kind of difficult for me back then, but definitely stuck with me, and I still use it today.
So going back to your Parachar days and marketing that you were
Yeah.
talking about, like, so how are you using your things that you learned in marketing right now?
I learned a couple of things. One, to I learned that the tongue has no bone, so you can go and ask for anything, and someone actually might be able to give it to you. So that's something I use today. So in fact, when I go to a supplier and say, "Oh, hey, can you give me this for X price?" I don't tell him the actual price I want. I actually tell him maybe half of that or one third of that, and so marketing definitely taught me bargaining. It also taught me how to handle a team and how to handle people and how to actually communicate with people better. So I use that for work also. I use that when I did consulting with Deloitte also. I also use that, in fact, in my MSIS interview before I got into Kelly, because we had like a GD and a personal interview round, and the whole situation, the whole interview was set up in such a way that we kind of had to interact with one another, come up with a solution to a problem, and they were looking at that point, which I see now from the other side of the table, was that you can interact in a team and you're not rude, you're not cutting someone off and things like that. So marketing kind of taught me those things very early on.
Coming to your journey about Kelly, you mentioned, I mean, I would love to know more about what made you like decide on Kelly, and then how was your whole interview process?
So when I went into the interview, actually, when you walk into the interview, you have this whole meet and greet with a current student before you go inside the actual interview room and do your whole group discussion and personal interview and stuff. And so they tell you a little bit about the college, and they try to relax you and talk to you and stuff. And so I actually asked one of them saying, do you think Kelly has changed you? Do you think it's a good school to go to? Do you think if you had to choose or compare with any other school, would you pick something else, or did you have those options back in the day? And they said, honestly, I don't know how to put it other than it was a life changing process. And obviously at that interview I was like, what do you mean by life changing, and what nonsense, and he's just saying this because it's his school. But when you come out of Kelly, you see your thought process completely change, because they do case studies on day one, and then they do case studies on the last day, and you can see there is such a huge difference. You go in a student, a learner, but you come out a consultant who's ready to face the world with Kelly. So truly, truly life changing for me. With the interviews, there was a group discussion, and I had it back to back. Unlike one of our other classmates, Mansi, who got selected for, she had a group discussion, and then after a couple of months, she had her personal interview. I was in the second batch because my GRE score was so low. Um, but so I had a group discussion and then sat outside for about half an hour and had a personal interview. And my personal interview was literally, oh, tell me some good restaurants in Mumbai, and why do you think I should go to them? And why do you think I should leave my hotel and go to them? This was my personal interview, literally. So it was really
Oh
funny,
my
and
God.
yeah, it was really random and really funny. But
These are like the Stoffel questions. I mean,
yeah,
generally when
yeah,
you go for those,
exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. So I was a little taken aback. I was like, why is he asking me this? So, but I think So I now help the dean or the chair of our program to kind of take these interviews whenever he comes to Bombay. I did it in Delhi last year as well. So I now understand his thought process when he asks questions like this, or when he's really mean to someone, or when he's really nice to someone, because I know what he's thinking and what he's looking for in a candidate, which obviously I did not know back then. So it's a really interesting change in the whole situation.
You've got any tips for the candidates?
um, I would say know your resume backwards. Um, don't lie on it, and be confident in yourself. There isn't a wrong answer in that interview.
Okay, those are good tips. And like to add to your experience with
Yeah.
the personal interview in Kelly, my PwC full time interview was like that. So we had
Oh,
four,
really?
yeah, we had 4 rounds of behavioral interview, and that's about it. And
Yeah.
like one of the interviewers, he asked me, like, where have you traveled? So I said I have been to Austin, and he was from Austin, which I knew because I
Oh,
had
that's
checked
nice.
his LinkedIn profile. So I wanted something to talk about, right? So
Yeah.
then he goes like, which bars did you go to in Austin? Can you recommend some
Nice.
places and all that? And I knew he was from Boston, but he was just making conversation. It was very
Yeah.
similar to that. But
Yeah.
going back to your whole interview, like, so Kelly is one of the like it's the best school for information systems, right? We all know that. It
Yeah.
was my super ambitious college as well.
Yeah.
And you said your
Yeah.
GRE scores were low. So like before
Very low.
even you
Yes.
get selected for the interviews, they go through your documents and your whole application. So apart like
Yep.
apart from your GRE score, what do you think made your application like they selected your application for what reason?
Um. Honestly, if I had to guess, and I would only be able to guess because I don't know what their thought process exactly is behind the whole application selection, but my best guess would be the SOP that I had, because it made a very strong case for me wanting to do a master's in management of information systems. Um, so and it kind of had a flow, so that's what I also recommend to most of the people who are applying for an MSIS program. Make sure your SOP or your recorded video or whatever has a flow, and gives them a reason for understanding why you want to do whatever program it is that you want to do. With me, I kind of highlighted that I came from a family which does business, and didn't see myself coding for the rest of my life, because that's not something I enjoy. I'm a very people's person. I like to talk to people. I like to be around people. It would make sense that I go on to the consulting side of, or rather management side of IT, and kind of be the bridge between the coders and the management. And so MSIS was an automatic tick mark or next steps in my career. So that, I think that's what made my application more than anything else, because like I said, GRE score was really bad.
And did you had a counselor, right, helping you out? So like, did you write
I
your own
did.
SOP or they helped you a lot?
Yeah, I would not recommend a counselor other than for maybe selecting the schools and kind of having that. I don't know if you all have gone through a counselor, but if you've seen, they give you this Excel sheet which has the deadlines and how many SOPs it requires and how many LORs it requires and stuff. So if you're in college and you're not going to be able to do that, then I would recommend a counselor for that part. But with the SOP, fortunately or unfortunately, most of it was me. And my SOP also went through a lot of iterations. So it went to my brother, it went to some friends, it went to some seniors. So I think I changed it about 10 or 12 times before I finally submitted it. So I would say the SOP, you should take time with that and like structure it well. But having said that, Kelly, and I don't know about most other schools, but Kelly no longer has the SOP requirement, because they're coming to interview you anyway. So they've removed that as a requirement in your application. And a lot of times, what happens is you know that you can teach them what they really need to learn to get the job done, but you know that if they are not culturally a fit, it's not going to work. So they are, obviously these schools are also looking for that. They're also looking for the fact that the person can be molded to be someone who will be recruited post getting out of school or university or whatever.
Yeah, just adding to what Eloni said, there was a saying in PwC: find candidates with whom you can sit on an airport for 4 5 hours.
Oh yeah, we had that too. Yeah.
So moving from your interview process, how was life in Kelly and how was Indiana?
Initially, basically, it was a little bit of a shock because it's a much smaller town. And so Kelly starts their course very early. They start in, I think, end of May or first week of June, and everyone else starts in like August. So when we went to school, like it's a huge campus. I think it's like 2,000 acres. And it was completely empty because all the classes actually start in August and we go in for this jumpstart program. So initially, uh, and even the buses were not frequent because it was summer, and like restaurants used to shut early because there were no students. And so it took a while to get used to ensuring you get dinner before 7:30, 8 o'clock, and the restaurants shut because Bombay is like, oh, we can order food at like 3 a.m. also. So there was a little bit of an adjustment there. But once like school actually started, so Indiana University actually started, there were so many people over there. And the whole vibe and color and culture, everything you could see, and it changed overnight. So you could see a lot of people around the bars. You could see restaurants open till later. The buses obviously became more frequent. The campus no longer looked like a ghost campus. It looked like Hogwarts. Because if you see, Kelly has stone buildings and lots of trees around and huge grounds and stuff. So we used to sit outside and joke that, oh, hey, this is like our Hogwarts campus. Kelly, like in that sense, there was obviously a change in the whole environment and thought process and stuff like that. But with I really loved the classes and case studies. And um, so Kelly has this thing where in the first few weeks they do lunch and dinner every day for the people there. So during your jumpstart program, you're actually meant to have lunch with your class. And so you get to interact with new people, and you're actually kind of put in that environment, so you make friends really quickly. So it was pretty easy.
And like the program is 1 year long, right? Or it's more than that?
No, it's a year unless you do like an internship. So it's a year. Like if you take your courses, they're just 30 credits, and so you can do it in a year. But if you do an internship, whether summer or 6 months or 11 months, it has those options, and so you can make your program longer like that.
Like where did you intern? How was that experience? And was it Deloitte only where you interned? Or
No, I in fact interned in Bloomington with Cook Medical. And that was it was a real learning experience for me because my role was basically business analyst, and I was the intermediary between the IT team. So they had a complete in-house IT team, and all their systems were built in-house. So even the regulatory system that spoke directly to the FDA system that they had was built in house and was kind of had evolved over many years because this is a really old company. And so my role was basically between the regulatory team and the IT team to kind of get the requirements back and forth and stuff like that. The main thing was actually that office started at 8 a.m. sharp. So we had to reach at 7:45, and I had to drive in the snow for the first time. So much learning there. 7:40. So we would have to reach at 7:45 to clock in at 8, and we would have to leave at 4 o'clock or 4:30, I think. And if you stay beyond that, they're supposed to pay you more because you're an intern and stuff. And so if you don't clock out, your manager has to explain why and all of that. So I really learned being on time out there, because coming from India, you are a little lax about, oh, hey, it's okay if I'm 5 minutes late, but really not in this case.
And I think for y'all, these would be one of your first work experiences, right?
Yep.
Because y'all directly went
Yeah.
for your masters after college. So, I mean, mostly one of your first jobs kind of teach you a lot of life skills more than the
Yeah,
technical knowledge
for
or
sure.
the real business essence of things. But I mean, and that's something you kind of carry forward with you for a very long time.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was the first thing that where you're actually earning money and doing things where you're actually responsible for something wholly and solely. So you realize the importance of working. You also realize how much more fun school or studying is versus how boring work can be. So yeah, for sure.
I would want to know, like, after doing your internship in a very different company, what made you kind of choose or go into consulting, and why did you choose Deloitte specifically?
So consulting was always the dream for me because it was. I always thought that I wanted to be in a professional line where one which would allow me to travel a lot because I really enjoy traveling, and two, which would allow me to kind of have projects that would switch up pretty quickly, so I could learn more things more quickly. So that was the two reasons for wanting to go into consulting. Um, and so after the internship, I was looking for those kind of roles. And with Kelly, those are the kind of companies that come to campus and are available to international students comparatively more easily than most other schools. Um, so I applied to obviously all of them, but Deloitte had won the highest pay, very frankly, and two, it was known for having the best projects at that point in time. I don't know what the situation is anymore, and so I actually wanted to do systems integration and strategy. I wanted to be in that role, but I messed up my partner interview because I blanked out completely because I was very, very nervous. So I finished all three interviews, my tech interview, my the other I forget what the other interview is called, but anyway, so I finished three other interviews and then finally reached my partner interview, and he asked me something really simple, and I completely blanked out. He even tried to help me, I remember, but I came out of the interview and he's like, "Why were you so nervous? Because you blanked out because of that, and now I don't know if we are going to be able to select you." And I knew I wasn't getting in right then. So I had to sit for the whole interview thing again in spring, and that's when I got my job. And luckily, it was with Deloitte, but I landed up with a advisory role. So that's not consulting, but the advisory side of Deloitte, which does cybersecurity and governance, risk and controls, and stuff like that. um, which was not exactly my core interest, but I was okay with it that back then. I did that for a while, I think about 8 or 9 months over there in the US, but I was working out of the Indianapolis office. And so I was not enjoying living alone and having no friends around and stuff. So I had to kind of take a decision as to what to do back then.
So, how long did you work for them, and then when did you move to India, and
So
why did you decide to move back?
So I worked with Deloitte US for I think 8 or 9 months, which is when the loneliness in Indianapolis really started to hit me. There was a period of I think 1 or 2 months where I would travel for work, and then I would all travel to some friend's place for like I had not been home for 2 months. So at that point, I realized that this needs to change, and either I need to change my city or like I need to make some major change and move to a place where at least I have some friends around. And so, like I said, because the team was so small, I was able to have a very open conversation with my partner, and um, he was like, "Okay, why don't you think of moving?" So initially, his response was like, "Oh, you feel like you're not getting enough time for personal stuff. Why don't you join a couple of groups and stuff?" I was like, "But that's not the problem. The problem is Indianapolis because I there is no scope to make friends." And he's like, "But you were fine in Bloomington." I was like, "Yeah, I was fine in Bloomington because I was in college and I had a lot of people around me, and this is not working for me." So that kind of led into, okay, what city do you want to move to? And at that point, I was actually okay with New York, Chicago, or even San Francisco. So I was basically wanting to move to a bigger city because that's how I'd grown up in Bombay, and I wanted to go back to that lifestyle and stuff. And he said, "Okay, let me see what I can do." And then he came back to me after a couple of days saying, "Hey, it's going to take about 2 years to do this." So I had to survive for 2 more years in Indianapolis, which I didn't agree with at all. And I was just like, I genuinely cannot do this. And so that happened. And then my dad fell a bit ill at that point. And So these two things were really playing on my mind. And then my partner, I think the next day or like a couple of days later, came in and said, "Hey, aren't you from Mumbai? Would you be okay moving to the Deloitte Mumbai office?" And I saw that as an opportunity to kind of move back, and really thought that it kind of fit in my head at that point, considering I was not happy where I was, and dad was not well and stuff. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
with that.
Indianapolis is a little. You can get
Yeah,
pneumonia pretty quickly,
yeah,
and it's cold like
it's
crazy. So
really cold, right? And especially because we come from Bombay and are not at all used to that cold and that kind of temperature variation, it can get to you pretty quickly.
yeah, I think like when you're in college, it's fine, but when you get that job offer and
Yeah,
it's very easy to be like, okay, let me move to this city, and then
yeah,
already job finding is a pain in itself. So
yeah,
as soon as you get that first offer, you're like, okay, let me jump on this. I'll
yeah,
figure things later. I'll find a group. I'll make friends.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. And that
yeah,
doesn't happen that easily.
cool. So yeah, so how was your transition to Mumbai?
Good and bad. I realized that when we were in engineering, kind of lived in a bubble, and that I had grown up differently than maybe what I would have in India. So there were some things. So I had a reverse culture shock for a bit, for sure. But
Like what?
I think, like
Any
Was
for
that
example?
like
example,
more towards work or?
no, it was more to do with the social environment. Work also, because you came from working with a US Deloitte to an India Deloitte. Work culture is really different. But I'll get to that. Socially, I felt like a lot of more eyes were on me. Questions were asked. And for me, like my parents are very, very, um, I don't know what to call it other than liberal or
Cool.
very cool. Yeah, very cool. They don't care what time
Pooja
I
has
get
the
home.
coolest parents
I
of all.
know. Like I met
Yeah.
them this December or something. They are the coolest parents I've met.
Oh my god. So they're very cool. So I never faced that. I mean, I didn't face a problem at home. It was more people around, aunties, uncles, all of that uh, pressure kind of came on me. For example, Are, don't wear this and go. What will, so and so think? And I'm just like, but why? What is your problem? Or people on the road will stare, which was a very I think when we were in engineering, either we had learned to ignore or kind of, or we had just grown up in that environment, so we didn't realize. But when I came back, it was a little. It took me a while to readjust to that, and then with work, so like I said, the US is very punctual, and if they have a meeting set up at like 11 a.m., they'll make sure they're there at 5 minutes to 11, and if it's still 11:30, the meeting will go until 11:30. Even if you still have a discussion, they'll reschedule and set up a meeting again. Versus India, like I had a client where I've reached his office at 9 a.m. in the morning. Meeting is scheduled at 9:30. He calls me and he's like, "Oh, I'm not coming to office today. Sorry, we'll have to reschedule." But I'm already outside your office. You could have told me this at 8 o'clock or whatever time. You could have told me earlier. If I've traveled all the way to make it for this meeting. Like I like I said, it's a reverse culture shock, and you readjust ultimately. But it's definitely there. Even small things like initially we used to go out and someone, like you walk into a bar right behind someone, or you walk into a coffee shop right behind someone and they don't hold the door for you. Girl or guy, why aren't you holding the door? Like, I don't get it. So that it really took me a while and a lot of patience to be like, okay, let it go, just let it go. Like, it's not the US, it's not like things, you're in India, they don't do this is not a thing, just let it go. So it's small things like this, rather than maybe very, very big things that kind of had to be readjusted to. Even for that matter, traffic, or people breaking the light, or people just generally breaking rules while driving, took a while to get readjusted to.
And then when did you decide to quit and join family business?
So I was about to finish a little over a year, and we were so here's the thing that you have to know about my family. We've always discussed um, business, or major decisions in business as a family. So it would be mom, dad, my brother, and me. And we would sit together and kind of, oh, we're taking this step, or oh, we're opening up to this big client, or oh, we're expecting to get business from XYZ place. So at the back of um, my mind, or almost every week, there would be this kind of discussion. And so just as I was kind of trying to figure out, okay, maybe I need to leave and do something else with my life, we got this huge proposal to get into toothbrushes again, which was what we did very early on, which is what dad did very early on, work wise. And so, since we were expanding, I thought it was a good idea to go into that line, and dad needed that help at that point as well. So, um, decided to move into the family business. Also, at that point, I definitely thought that it would, make sense to kind of learn. I would learn more quickly, or learn how to do business more quickly under my dad than anyone else. Um, and I always wanted to, or always still have wanted to do my own thing. So I decided that that was the next step for sure.
So I have other few friends who joined their family business, and the
Mhm.
one thing that they complain to me when we talk at length
Yeah.
is how difficult it is to work with a family member. So, like, did you face that thing, or and if not, why not?
Not really, actually. I didn't face that thing. One, because I've for me, my parents have been more like friends, so I could very easily go and say, "Hey, you know what? I don't think this is right. Maybe you all should look at it another way." And they've been open to acknowledging that I may have a different thought process, or maybe my thought process might be worth listening to. So I didn't have that problem. I also uh, we, like dad and me, very early on kind of separated our work initially, because there was a lot going on. So we kind of had to compartmentalize and say, okay, hey, you do this and this, and I'll do this and this. And then we kind of, I think, a little, maybe every 2 days or every night, get together and updated each other about, oh, I this is what happened, this is what I did, this is what I didn't do. I mean, of course, there are times where you have to take a joint decision or whatever, but this was like, these are the two things I think that helped us compartmentalize. The other thing is that my mom is also part of the business. So it's not just me and dad who go to work. My mom also works with us. So she had a very major role in kind of balancing me and my dad, who are very strong personalities, I think. She also made very clear to us that once we are home, or once we're out of the work environment, or once it's beyond whatever 7-8 o'clock, um, we are no longer, working. We have switched off, and kind of, we played games together, or whatever, watch TV together, or whatever, do something that is not work. And even on the dinner table, like, she doesn't let us discuss work. She's like, discuss something else, you all are talking about this all day, stop it, stop. So I think these are the few things that kind of helped us not go on and on and on, or face any difficulties, really.
I still don't know a lot about what exactly your business is. I mean, what do you all actually do?
So, okay, we're actually into manufacturing of a wide range of plastic products. We currently manufacture everything from a toothbrush to a sketch pen to lunch boxes to um, I don't know what else,
PP.
pens, PP. So only face shields, like not all of PP, but face shields, yes. Also, we do like iris scanners, like the plastic part, if that makes sense. So a lot, basically a wide range of anything that can be injection molded, or that has an injection molded component. We do. So we worked with. So my dad worked with Colgate, and that's how he came into the business. He started when I was born, so it's been about 27 years now.
Right. So, what's the brand name?
It's called Fine Edge.
So I mean, what part of it like do you take care of? Because I mean, being in the industry for like dealing with a lot of brands like these, the ones that you spoke about, a lot of
Right.
their purchase managers and even I mean, there is a very big mix of dealing with
Right.
blue collared people and also
Yeah.
like kind of rough. I mean, I'm lacking a
Yeah.
better word here, but yeah, I
Yeah.
mean those kind of purchase managers because I have had like a fair share of negotiations with them and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know how it goes. Yeah. So
Yeah. So,
how have you managed to like go through that
um,
whole process and like put your build your space there?
yeah. So, when it comes to meeting people like that, you kind of they are your clients ultimately. So you first knuckle under and say yeah, whatever you want and stuff, and then when the time comes, I think you learn how to be firm and hold your place. Um, with me, my main struggle was not in fact these companies but my retail clients for my household products, because they're the kind of people who don't realize that girls can also work in this kind of line. So we got a lot of अरे आपकी बेटी है, what about your son, where is your son? And initially it was a little frustrating because I'm like, dude, I'm right here, I'm right in the room with you, why are you asking for? And for us, because my brother is there, like my dad would be like, yeah, but he's in the US and he's not coming back. But it would be difficult to kind of for him also to explain, and for me also to kind of keep patience. But I think as time goes, one, they learn to accept, and they also realize that you're ultimately running the company, and if you're running a company and you're clearly capable of running it, they accept you for who you are and learn to do business with you. So that the client side,
Yeah.
that's what happened with the unskilled labor. Also there was a backlash because initially I had to be like, hey, do this, and it would be difficult because they don't see you as the boss, they don't see you as someone who they'll take instructions from, because a, you're younger than them most likely, and b, you're a girl. So it kind of it took a while for them also to get used to it. For them, the easiest way to get them to understand was to show them how it was better to do it your way, and quicker and more efficient, but also easier for them. So the minute they realized that, oh acha, this is easier than doing it our way, they were like, oh, okay, okay, you're right. So that was the easiest way to kind of convince them and make them realize why you are where you are, very honestly.
Absolutely. I mean, talking about the whole situation where accepting women, I mean, even to date, I have been
Yeah.
seeing that kind of comments like has happened with my dad as well. Like he's from textile industry and
Okay.
obviously run by a lot of
A lot of, yeah.
middle age
Yeah.
and old age men.
Yeah.
And like he had kind of taken me to one of his clients to introduce and like talk about what
Yeah.
is the future towards the whole unorganized sector and how like they
Right.
can improve beyond digital. And
Right.
I mean, he's like it was my sisters also joined the business, so like both of us had gone
Okay.
for that meeting. And his question right in front of us was, "Where is your son?"
Yeah,
And
exactly. Like,
I
why do you ask that question? So,
yeah, yeah. I mean, but I was super proud that day when my dad said that these
yeah,
girls run it and they're doing a better job
exactly.
probably than what my
Exactly.
son would have done.
Exactly. That feels good. That's the best part. I feel that
Yeah.
that is so satisfying internally. And I think when people see that the girl has just as much knowledge as a boy would, they will accept. It will just take time to get there.
How do you
Absolutely.
how do you keep calm in such situations? Even you, Eloni, like what's your thought process?
I mean, for me, honestly, because I have been in India for the longest time and have started things in India itself. I've gone through that initial phase of struggle where
Mm,
I was not even taken seriously being a CEO of a company. And all of those things, kind of acceptance that, okay, I have to kind of prove myself every time I'm on the table. That's
yeah.
kind of been my journey. Like, I've accepted that I have to tell them 10
Yeah.
things more than probably a
Yep.
guy candidate
Yep.
would say and give them insights about. I would have to prove it to them that, okay, I know it better and I can even apply it and I can manage a team who can deliver the thing as well. So it's always been a struggle there, but you kind of have been in that stage where you've accepted it that okay, you would have to go a little extra, but then eventually you will get it. So it's
Yeah.
like it's the race that you will keep running till you finally
Yeah.
know that okay, this is where you are going to be accepted as equal, and you don't have to every time prove yourself.
Yeah. I also think that it's ultimately, like you keep calm because you know the reward is worth it. So you learn to keep calm. You're like, okay, theek hai, you're saying something, you say it. I don't care if you mean it or you don't mean it. It doesn't matter. I'll still do my work, do my best, and get what I need to get.
Also, like sometimes when I put like myself in my client's shoes, I feel like they themselves have not seen that over time.
Yeah,
Like for them, it's a
yeah,
very new thing. So there is always like a reluctance there, and I mean they are also trying to adapt to it, but they don't have that confidence because it's not in history that they've seen this happening. So there is an eventual transition to their acceptance happening. So I
yeah,
mean,
for
till then you
sure.
have to
Yeah,
kind of be accepting of okay, this is how their thought process is, and you are now here to just educate them and make it better.
educate them. Yeah, yeah, for sure. That is definitely one nice way of looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, I have a sister, and I keep telling her that be prepared for all of this. And this, she just started the workforce in India, but I think you
Okay.
guys are doing a great job paving the way for future
Yeah.
women.
I think you learn to accept it. So at one of my interviews with Deloitte India, um, someone asked, one of the managers or whatever, someone asked me, saying, "Are you married?" And I found that very I was like, why is that relevant in a work interview? Um, so when that happened, I kind of got taken aback, but ultimately I realized that they haven't seen otherwise, or they don't know otherwise, and so they are asking this, and it's okay. And you kind of you're here to educate them and show them that you can um, work well or work just as well as anyone else.
I agree. I mean, there have been so many times where I have like given an entire pitch, and then after that, like I get asked these questions that okay, who's kind of backing your company, or who's on
Overly.
your board of directors, or yeah, like is there a partner that you have whom we would be meeting in the next session? And I'm like, okay, no, this is
It's
it. This
me.
is all you get.
Yeah.
We'll move on from your company and then we'll talk about your new Instagram page, Snug Story. Right. So like
Yeah.
tell us more about it.
So I've been writing since Atit and I became friends, I think, since about 10 years now. But I've always been very secretive and shy about sharing it. So I was not very confident that it was good writing or that it would be worth reading. And so I had not shared it up until now. um, with the lockdown and having a little more time to myself, um, I kind of went back to things I'd written about 10 years ago, refined them. Or yeah, there are some poems that are new, but most of them are stories are kind of um, I think it was a big step for me personally for me to like put this up and out there into the world, but it's received a lot of love and a lot of people have said really nice things. So I'm quite happy. And um, basically, Snug Stories was I when I had this image in my head where I thought that if I ever put this up, I wanted to be it to have a character, it to have a whole personality and story behind it, and so that's where the penguin comes from. I mean, I think I've eaten a lot of people's head about the uh, type, like the name and the character that it should be and stuff, but I'm very happy with what it's turned out to be. It's The stories are, I think a lot of people have asked me this, so I'm going to answer it before you guys ask me. The stories are related to or have related to experiences that I have had, and so they come from a very truthful place. If I can't think of a better word, but they come from a truthful place, and they come from a very realistic perspective of things.
Yeah, that's why they have
So
an
yeah,
impact. Yeah. I
Yeah,
love
thank
the
you.
stories. And like going back to Atit, you said like so Atit encouraged you or what happened? What's the story there?
Yeah, Atit has been, I think, my sounding board for a lot of things. He's been a shoulder to cry on. He's been everything. He's been like, I mean, I don't see my life without him anymore. So, but he definitely. So it was Atit. It was my brother. It was one of my school friends, and Niket, who I don't know if all of you know, but most of you will. Um, who really helped me and pushed me to kind of go ahead with Snug Stories and put it up, even when I was not sure at all. And I think my brother, it was, he told me, he's like, what's the worst that can happen? People won't like it and you'll get some bad comments, and that's about it. And he's like, and my brother's a grammar Nazi, so when he said this, it meant a lot. And it really hit me hard. So that's when I decided to kind of go ahead and post the stories. So he's my Grammarly, so I go to him every time I have to post, which is why it takes a little longer. So I'm like, hey, can you check this? And then he'll read it in his time because he's in the US, so he reads it and then he'll reply after 2-3 days and stuff like that. So um, but I really enjoy writing each one of them and then posting them. And I really love seeing the comments and the love that it has got um, so quickly from even unknown people. So that was really nice to see.
Yeah, thank you for saying all that, Pooja. And yeah, I mean, it's same thing with us with this podcast project, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's very important to publish yourself in, and it's so easy these days, and it takes
yeah,
a certain amount of courage
yeah,
to post it out there,
yeah.
because it's a lot of personal effort and
Right.
a lot goes into it, and
Yeah,
then uh, getting like negative feedback or negative comments on it is
yeah,
just part and parcel of the whole.
yeah, for sure,
So
for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, and I'll definitely add to the courage part. Like a few, like I think a couple of years back, I used to be very judgmental of people who used to post random things. But like when you don't realize what goes on behind the work they put,
yeah,
plus
yeah,
like what monsters they have to face themselves. So even when I started my
yeah,
blog, like I was very I don't write, right? I have no idea how to write things. I've never written ever. So when I started blogging,
yeah,
it was so difficult, so I never posted it anywhere. And then my sister, like,
yeah.
she started telling me, a couple of my friends, because I used to send them, they were like, it's not that bad. Like, you are just overthinking
You
about
should
things.
post
Yeah.
it.
You should
Yeah,
just be like,
yeah,
you should just post them online and it should be fine.
yeah,
So, like, ever
yeah.
since I started posting, I personally have changed my perspective about like everyone who like
Exactly. Yeah.
takes a lot of courage to like be out
It
there.
takes a lot of courage. It's a lot of effort. I also feel like um you get to see a side of the person that you probably wouldn't in day-to-day life, right? So I mean, all of y'all know me, y'all know me as a person, but y'all probably don't know, or maybe y'all know, but y'all don't realize where these poems are coming from or where this is coming from. But for me, it's like an outlet. I feel each time I post something, I feel happy, and I'm sure it's the same for you when you write something on your blog or when you do this podcast. I feel like when y'all post it, y'all, there's so much pride and happiness when y'all do it, which is really beautiful.
Newton said, if I have seen the future, it is by standing on shoulders of the giants. We bring to you these giants in the life of our guests. Our next segment is Top 3, a curated list of top 3 recommendations from our guests.
And we start with one of our first, which are your top three book recommendations. And is there any specific book that you have gifted the most?
Top three book recommendations to and someone would be definitely Who Moved My Cheese, The Martian, and um, 48 Laws of Power, which was recommended by Atit. Um, these all these three books came into my life at some turning point or the other, and they're my favorites. So um, I would suggest going and reading them. For everyone who's seen the Martian, the movie, read the book because it's a million times better and you will die laughing. Um, I think the book that I have most gifted though is The Alchemist, which is also a really, really good book, but I think a lot of people have read it, so it wasn't in my top three.
Yeah, and 48 Laws of Power was actually recommended to me by Tapan.
Oh, really? I really love that book, Tapan. That's a fab book.
I actually like the way Robert Greene, even as I don't know if you guys have read Mastery and The Art of Seduction. I think that's one of them.
I've read The Art of
Yeah,
Seduction. That was good too. Yeah.
his books are like always like they have like
Yeah.
2000, 1000 reviews and things like that. They're really like all of them are so good. Cool. We'll move
Yeah.
on to the next one. What are your top three movie recommendations and TV show recommendations?
Movie recommendations. God, there are so many.
Yeah, you're a serial movie watcher,
Yeah,
right?
I love watching TV. Yeah, I can watch TV all day, every day. If I would get paid for it. But movies, currently, I would say Andhadhun, Knives Out for everyone who hasn't seen it, um, and Inside Out because I am a kid and I love animated movies. So Inside Out shows. Um, I am a big fan of uh, criminal like TV shows, so Criminal Minds, because I really enjoy seeing how what part of the human brain or what psychology kind of makes someone think like a killer or whatever, and maybe that's a little twisted, but yeah. So Criminal Minds, I think Bones and White Collar, both very underrated shows as well. And oh, Haunting of Hill House, that was also really good.
Any three investments that you've made? That it could be
Oh,
monetary, it could be non-monetary also. Anything that has made your life easier, maybe.
a vacuum cleaner, because right now the situation is like that I'm doing all the household chores. So that was a genius investment, and it's a genius investment for all those in India because our houses don't have vacuum cleaners, or most people don't own vacuum cleaners. So I had forced my parents to buy a vacuum cleaner because we have a flat at Daman right above the factory, and there isn't a regular maid there, so we kind of have to clean up and all after ourselves. And so I refused to use the broom and said, okay, I want to get a vacuum cleaner. So that was a good investment back then. Or actually, the other investment would be shares in Google because it's a great investment, reliable company, not going anywhere, I don't think. So that would be the other one, which is going to help you monetarily. Third investment. I think this is a very psychological or investment. It's my suggestion to everyone to go travel on your own or maybe with one or two close people. Go take a trip, and I think that's an investment of a lifetime because you the amount you grow when you travel, the amount you learn about about your friends or people around you, and the amount you learn about different cultures is can't be valued monetarily. So for sure that.
Unlike the name, we are dwelling deep into our guest's thought process. Rapid Fire is our next segment where our guests will answer some quirky, some weird, but mostly fun questions.
Cool.
So first question, your favorite purchase that you've made under $100 or rupee 5,000?
It's that watch. It was priceless. My first paycheck watch. That watch has brought me so much excitement in my life.
Second question, which is one tourist attraction that you were really disappointed by?
It was Dubai, and it was not so much the place. I think it was the hype that I had created in my head. So I remember there was a year where most of us, like back to back through the year, everyone had gone to Dubai, and each one came back, and in our group, and each one came back saying, "Oh my God, it was unbelievable! It was so cold. We had so much fun. Blah 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 blah." So I had built up this hype in my head about Dubai, and I went, and it was great. It was a good trip. I enjoyed it. I liked the place, but it obviously didn't live up to the huge hype that I had built in my head. So maybe that one's my fault, but yeah, that would probably be the disappointing.
If you could be a CEO of one of the major companies, which one would it be, and what would be the first thing that you would implement?
It would probably be Google. And the major change that I would make is have Google Duo linked to Hangouts, or maybe make it the same thing and have more users, like unlimited amount of users on that.
Okay, so next question. Your favorite cartoon TV show growing up?
It would be a tie between Pokemon and Dexter's Lab, I think. Oh, Tom and Jerry too. Oh, there are too many. I'll go with Tom and Jerry.
If you could write something on a gigantic billboard anywhere, what would it say and why?
You're not alone, and even if you are, there's someone who's alone right next to you, so you're not alone in that either.
Our next segment is called Not the Onion, presenting 4 news articles that are mind-blowingly ridiculous that they could have been written by The Onion, a satirical news company. However, one is a fake article created by us. You have to guess which one is not The Onion.
Article 1. Indonesian minister's misogynistic comment compares coronavirus to having a wife. A senior Indonesian minister has been slammed by human rights activists after he compared the coronavirus to the control a husband has over their wife. Yesterday, I received a meme from a friend which said, "Coronavirus is like your wife. Initially, you try to control it, then you realize you can't, then you learn to live with it," he said during a streamed event. The comment has since made international headlines and has been denounced by women's rights groups. Second, airline resumes flight to Italy but turns around when airports shut. We are all pretty excited about being able to travel again. But Greek airline Olympic Air might be more eager than most. The low-cost airlines resumed services to Sardinia, Italy on Saturday, but was forced to turn around at its destination because the airport was still closed. The Airbus hung around in a holding pattern, hoping for permission to land, but no dice. A diversion was proposed, but the flight crew opted to cut its losses and head back. Third article, the length of ring finger linked to men's risk of dying from coronavirus study finds. The length of a man's ring finger has been linked to his risk of dying of COVID-19 in a study due to its potential links to testosterone levels. Men with longer ring fingers appear to have a lower risk of dying from or having severe COVID-19 symptoms, according to the authors of the study published. It's not clear what could explain this association. For instance, in general, males have a less robust immune response than females and are more susceptible to infectious diseases, the authors explain. And Article 4. A man is facing a $7,300 fine for wrestling with a bear at a zoo and breaking COVID-19 rules by not wearing a face mask. A man has been fined after he jumped into a bear enclosure at a zoo and wrestled with one of the animals. The 23-year-old, who is thought to have been drunk at the time, was filmed by baffled visitors in the zoo, which had just reopened after coronavirus lockdown was eased. After firefighters arrived to rescue the man from the enclosure, he was arrested and charged with animal cruelty and disturbing the peace, and for not wearing a face mask under the COVID-19 regulations. So I'll just summarize it. The first article is Indonesian minister comparing coronavirus to a wife, to having a wife. Second, airline resuming flight and turning back after the Italian airport was shut. The third, length of ring fingers linked to men's risk of dying from coronavirus, and a man wrestling a bear at the zoo and getting fined because he was not wearing a face mask. So Pooja, which one is the fake one?
I think it's the third one. Sounds absurd, and I feel like I've read The Indonesian Minister. It was between that and this one. I think it's the third one.
So
The ring
length of
finger.
ring finger.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heloni?
I would go for the Greek airline. It's just a wild guess.
Okay. Atit.
Okay.
I'll go with the Indonesian minister one. Some minister might have said it. I don't know if it was from Indonesia. Tapan likes to do that also. He would change small details.
I know some minister said it. I don't know who it was, but okay.
Okay, so the fake news is the Greek airline. So Heloni, you were right.
Oh, nice.
I would like to thank Pooja to be part of our show and sharing
Thank you.
amazing insights, starting from your uh, choosing your engineering college to the whole admissions process towards Kelly, and giving us better insights on what is the dean's thought process towards getting a student on board, and the experience in a reputed school like that, and the further journey of yours. Everything was super interesting and very inspiring, and we are really, really happy to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.
So that's about it, folks. We will be back next week with another guest and another story. We would love to hear your thoughts about the episode. Feel free to reach out to us on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. You can just search What the Hat Podcast. Also, subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Castbox, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast from, so you never miss out on the next episode. This is Hiloni, Atit, and Tapan signing off, and this was What the Hat.